Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. Because of a discrepancy in interviews, there are more questions about Fort Knox and the security and the existence of the gold there with a broken seal. Let's explore. Yes, Fort Knox. It's been quite an intriguing and fascinating part of American history. When it was first established, it was meant to be closer to the center of the country back during a time when Bretton Woods was just established, and they wanted to have a reserve of gold there protected in case of a land invasion. But since then, there's been some audits of the gold. And this is what we're going to kind of look into, because I think most of us can agree that the audits that have been taking place, have been kind of left to be desired. And with today's technology, there certainly is a way to do it. They've developed these seals to close it off, to prevent, re-entry and to kind of make it secure. But there's been some revelations that the seals have been broken, or at least that's what they're saying. We're going to take a look at an article here from Zero Hedge. This was shared with me by Chuck and Plata, and I think it's quite interesting and fascinating. This is a pretty detailed account here. We're going to go through it here, and it's by Jan Nieuwenhuis, and I think he was the one that made that other article about gold. I know he is a gold bug, so we have to kind of take a look at it from that perspective as well, too. But he had done some research on this, and he's saying that in March of 2018, on the audits of the U.S. gold reserves, he exposed that during that audit, procedures of the U.S. official gold reserves from 1974 through 2008 repeatedly audit staff deviated from the auditing protocol, while internal control meant to prevent this was failing. Many audits and assay reports have been destroyed. For decades, a significant share of the metal was excluded from verifications for no apparent reason, and the U.S. government went to great lengths in withholding information and spreading false information about the audits. Among other findings and documents obtained through the Freedom of Information Act request. All in all, these findings made the author Jan question the integrity of the auditor. After the last publication, he has obtained more documents from U.S. Treasury through FOIA requests, which expose another falsehood that puts the auditor in an even more peculiar position. In conflict with the audit protocol, the permanent seals of the vault compartments have been broken, time and time again. In addition, the auditor has lied about these events, and when confronted, is unable to explain its actions. By now, the author, Jan, has lost faith in the auditor fully. Now, keep in mind, you may remember that it wasn't long ago when Secretary Mnuchin and Mitch McConnell visited the Fort Knox to take a look at the inside. And here's a tweet. It's a Stephen Mnuchin. Thanks, staff, for hosting Fort Knox at the U.S. Bullion Depository. It's the first U.S. Treasury Secretary to visit since John Snyder in 1948. Glad gold is safe. Yes, indeed. That's the only color photograph. And then we have this photograph, black and white photograph, that's been photocopied and then that's sent to the media, which is kind of strange that they would do that. There were several photographs were released from that, but obviously that wasn't an audit. He just wanted to see it, and I believe it's there, but nonetheless, this raises more questions, and especially with this situation about these broken seals. This is very interesting and fascinating. It was a long investigative journey that Jan had partaken upon that led to make bold statements such as the ones above about the auditor of the world's largest gold holding. I wouldn't claim anything of this magnitude if I didn't thoroughly do my homework and research every single possibility that could have caused the auditor to have accidentally spread inaccurate material. including asking the auditor for an explanation. And any of the statements appeared to be false, surely they would be able to explain what I was missing. The head auditor said during a congressional hearing in 2011, transparency is our business. Who would disagree? The U.S. official gold reserves, weighing over 8,000 metric tons, deserve nothing less than an accurate audit. I do agree with that. My journey started in 2014 when I first discovered, in contrast to what I was accustomed to reading on blogs and in newspapers, when the U.S. official gold reserves are audited every year. I published an article on my discoveries titled A First Glance at U.S. Official Gold Reserve Audits, which was basically a summary of all the publicly available documents about the audits. Logically, these documents present a narrative that looks to be credible at the surface, but I found some questions left unanswered. And I wrote in my article, this post will be part one of a series. Little did I know what I got myself into. Given the importance of the subject, I intended to submit FOIA requests at the U.S. government in an open-minded attempt to have my concerns removed. Since 2014, I have been prosecuting the U.S. government. I have emailed staff on all related institutions, the U.S. Treasury, the Office of Inspector General of the Treasury, the U.S. Mint, and National Archives that were initially replied, but as I got closer to the details, ceased altogether. I've submitted several dozen FOIA requests to all related institutions, some of which were honored, some not. In search of answers, I repeatedly called the Inspector General. In one of those calls, my contact simply hung up while I was talking. The incident is emblematic of the whole investigation. On one occasion, the Mint wrote me a specific FOIA request would cost $3,145 based on an estimate of 1,200 pages of responsive documentation and the duplication costs associated with the requested documents. This estimate also includes 40 hours of estimated search time and 8 hours of estimated review time. The cost seemed outrageous to me, but I got financed through a crowdfunding campaign and paid the Mint. A few months later, I received 223 redacted pages that contained 68 pages of reports I didn't ask for and 21 pages that were copied twice. Effectively, I got 134 pages for $3,145. After some pressure on the Mint, they agreed the cost had been estimated too high, and I got the full amount refunded, and I ordered my crowdfunding platform to refund all my donors. The barrier of the cost was used to keep me at bay. To no avail, instead I got some essential pages in my possession. In total, I've written 9 articles to inform my audience about the developments, and they're linked there after the last one, which was comprehensive overview of every piece of information I have found, which was published on March 28, 2018 at the Balloon Star website. A reply to another FOIA request came into my mailbox. I received a document that irrefutably reveals a lie by the auditor. Today's article is about this falsehood and numerous other false statements by the auditor that all have one thing in common. They hide the fact that most vault compartments have been reopened multiple times after being put under permanent seals, which were meant to prevent reopening of the doors. Upon request, the auditor provided me one argument for these actions, the reopening of compartments. Alas, the argument is in conflict with another statement by them made under oath, so the auditor still stands as unable to answer critical questions. Unfortunately, and contrary to how it could have been done, the entire audit process from 1974 until 2008 is extremely complicated. The account below is simplified. I can't discuss every detail in every article, but for the ones that want to know the details, there are documented sources that Jan has provided here, which can be used to cross-check statements. And let's start with some background information, then we'll discuss the heart of the matter. The U.S. official gold reserves is the largest globally at 8,134 metric tons, owned by the U.S. Treasury. Although this gold does not back the U.S. dollar at a fixed parity as it did before 1971, it does provide essential support as a final backstop to the dollar and thus credibility to the present world reserve currency. The majority of the gold is located in the U.S. Mint Depository at Fort Knox. Smaller amounts are stored at the U.S. Mint Depositories in Denver and the West Point. Aggregated, this metal is referred to as deep storage gold and is captured within 42 sealed vault compartments. The remainder is at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And here we can see this graphic that shows that. All adds up to 8,134 metric tons here. That's over 261,498,926 ounces. When the audit commenced in 1974, the protocol design was simple. The following excerpt is from the first auditing committee. In performing the audit, the gold bars are physically moved from one vault compartment to another. During this operation, the melt numbers and the number of bars in each melt are verified with an inventory listing, and 1 in 50 melts is randomly selected for weighing and test assay. One melt averages about 20 bars cast from one crucible of molten gold. The audit protocol follows that these actions, having once been performed by an audit authorized committee in accordance with established procedures, will not have to be repeated as long as the asset verified remained under an unimpaired or joint seal. Compartments physically verified were placed under official joint seals to avoid the necessity of verifying all assets in each annual or specific settlement. The U.S. Treasury pledged to do a periodic cyclical inventory to ensure that about 10% of the gold was physically inspected annually, eventually to have audited all of the gold for which U.S. government is accountable by 1984. The essence of established procedures was to open, audit, and seal each compartment once. We will return to this fundamental topic later on. That is a picture of the seal, by the way. You can see there. Since the stated purpose of joint sealing was to avoid the need of re-audits, all the gold could, after 1984, be verified by simply checking the seals were unimpaired. Great intentions, but this was not what happened. The current auditor of the U.S. Monetary Gold is the Department of Treasury's Office of Inspector General. Representing the OIG, Eric M. Thorson attended the congressional hearing for the Gold Transparency Act, which was not enacted, that was initiated by Ron Paul in 2011. Mr. Thorson's testimony at the hearing serves as the official statement by the government on the audits. Having weighed his words carefully, Thorson spoke under oath. 100% of the U.S. government's gold reserves in the custody of the Mint has been inventoried and audited. I can say that without any hesitation because I have observed the gold and the security of the gold reserves myself. The Committee for Continuing Audit of the U.S. government-owned gold, the committee that started the audits, performed the annual audits of the Treasury gold reserves from 1974 to 1986. By 1986, 97% of the government-owned gold held by the Mint had been audited and placed under joint seal. So once you have done this, and that seal remains unbroken, then I'm not sure what other benefit there will be to going back into it at that point. Since 1993, when the OIG assumed responsibility for the audit, my office has continued to directly observe the inventory and test the gold. In fact, my auditors signed the official joint seals placed on those compartments, inventoried, and tested their presence. At the end of the fiscal year 2008, all 42 compartments have been audited. The Committee of Continuing Audit for the U.S. government-owned gold, or my office, and placed under official joint seals. So, again, in summary, from 74 to 86, 97% of the gold in the Mint had been verified by the Committee of Continuing Audit. In 1993, the OIG became responsible for the audits, and by 2008, all compartments have been verified and sealed. The conclusions we derive from Thorson's testimony are that from 1987 to 1992, there were no audits. From 1993 to 2008, the remaining 3% of the gold was verified. Thorson doesn't mention anything about vault compartments having been reopened. So here's the problem. The OIG did not assume responsibility for the audit since 93, but since 82, as disclosed in one of the few documents that survived in the 80s, Effective October 1st of 82, the internal audit staff of BGFO and the United States Mint were reorganized under the Department of the Treasury. Ever since the OIG became part of the audits in 1982, exactly what was supposed to happen did happen. Vault compartments that had been physically verified and sealed were reopened. So from 86 audit report regarding the Fort Knox and Denver 9 depositories. So as of September 30th, 1982, 100% of the gold stored at the depository was audited under the initial continuing audit program. Between July 83 and July 85, the gold was audited in accordance with the plan approved by the Treasury as follows. There we go. And there you see the dates there. From 84, 99.9% of the gold stored at the United States Denver Mint had been audited under the initial continuing audit program. Subsequent re-audits of gold were as follows. For some reason, starting in 83, re-audits were performed over 1,929 tons in accordance with the plan approved by the Treasurer. However, in 1983, both depositories had already been fully audited, while West Point had not. Why were these compartments reopened when the protocol stated that these actions, physical verification, having once been performed, will not have to be repeated as long as the assets verified remained under an unimpaired joint seal? The OIG can't explain this to me, and neither can it explain to me what the plan approved for the Treasurer was. What Thornton carefully refrained from mentioning under oath, he mentions in a written statement for the Gold Transparency Act at the surface. His official testimony seems identical to his written statement, but when I compared both word for word, the latter crosses the topic that excluded the former. Thornton never spoke about this in a congressional hearing. So from 87 to 92, the Mint continued to perform an annual inventory and verification of the gold reserves in accordance with its own policies over those compartments that had not been placed under the official joint seal. Note that from the quote above, we learned that the U.S. Mint, mind you, the custodian of the gold, audited the U.S. monetary gold in accordance with its own policies from 87 to 92. This is arguably like a bank opening its customer safety deposit boxes. According to universal auditing principles, a custodian is not authorized to audit its client's assets. An independent entity should audit custodial gold. This might explain why Thorson failed to mention this in a congressional hearing. I also will note that Edmund C. Moy has been on record saying that he's seen the gold in Fort Knox. He also thinks there should be an audit of the gold, too. So he has obtained several copies of the seals that were placed on the Mint in 5 deep storage compartments together, containing 795 tons of gold between 87 and 92. Thornton's written statement is false, as these compartments had in fact already been verified and sealed, because they were all at Fort Knox and Denver, which were fully audited by 82. So here's one of the real copies of the official joint seal. Look at that. There's the date. Kind of hard to see there, but 1990, looks like 1990 there. And then date of removal, 1993. See the date, July 25th, 1990, the depository is there. Those compartments had not been placed under official joint seal because we know Fort Knox was fully audited, and thus its compartments were put under official joint seal by 82. We can also see on the seal when compartment was sealed previously. It was in 1976, which is underlined in red. There it is. So this is a game changer, folks. This is raises some questions here. Last but not least, at the very bottom of the seal, we see a date of February 16th, 1993, in the red oval, which is when the seal was removed by the OIG, presumably for yet another re-audit. More evidence that the OIG must have known what happened in these compartments in between 1987 and 1992, as removing the seal in 1993 by the OIG clearly would have shown the history of the compartment. Attentive readers might see a pattern emerging. From 93 to 2008, additional compartments were re-audited. Thorson again did not mention these re-audits under oath, but his specific period, more than 2,000 tons of gold, saw the light of day again. I know through an Excel sheet the OIG sent me in response to the FOIA request. When I asked to contact the OIG, thousands of tons have been re-audited in periods of 93 to 2008. He said this, Mr. News, the position of the Treasury OIG with respect to the government-owned gold is set forth in the annual audit reports and this testimony from 2011. In addition, I can tell you that the reason the gold had to be re-verified in some cases was because occasionally vault contents would have to be moved, and in each case, the bars would have to be recounted to assure full accountability. That's from Richard Delmer there. And the OIG stopped responding to my emails by late 2016. Everything had to be submitted through FOIA requests, as I was told, which made my investigation take a few extra years. Notice the OIG doesn't mention the plan approved by the Treasurer, which at least could have explained the re-audits from 83 to 96 to 86. An explanation as to why so many compartments have been re-verified was because occasionally vault contents had to be moved. However, this argument makes no sense. It is true that since 1974, when the audit started, gold has to be moved. Roughly 1,900 tons were moved from New York Assay Office to West Point, but this movement occurred in 1982 before any re-audits began. There have been no other substantial movements of gold. Additional evidence indicating that there hasn't been any movement of deep storage gold comes ironically from Thorson and to the congressional hearing of Paul and Thompson in 2011. After Thorson's testimony, QA follows where Paul asked Thorson about the audits from 74 to 86 and if it would be worthwhile to inventory and assay this portion of the gold again. Thorson replies that would be unnecessary because there's no movement. These doors aren't open. There's nothing there that can happen. Because once these doors are sealed, it is very obvious if those seals are ever broken, there's no movement. The doors are not open. Which is a strange thing to say. Exactly why he was continuously reopening the compartment doors. With the statement, Thorson confirms that any compartment should never have to be reopened. Not only is this what happened time and time again, but it has also started precisely from the moment Thorson's department, OIG, came involved with the audits in 83. So he's trying to think of any legitimate reason why compartments have to be reopened. He decided to submit a FOIA request for audit protocols that prevailed after 92. Maybe the audit approach had changed. If the OIG can't explain it to, maybe I can find answers in some documents. What if I'm still missing something? Eventually, he received the 2005 Mint audit directive that shows whenever a compartment had been verified, the annual verification will be limited to inspection of the seals. Put differently, once physical verified, the doors remain closed. And so here it says, secondly, the contents of one or more compartments are counted, weighed, and assayed. Once the OIG is verified through counting, etc., the contents of each compartment containing deep storage assets, the annual verification will be limited to inspection of the seals. Makes sense. To this auditing approach matches from one from 1970s, like Thorson said during the congressional hearing in 2011. So once you have done the physical verification, the seal remains unbroken, then I'm not sure what other benefit there would be to going back at that point. There is no movement. These doors are not open. Again, saying that. So the conclusion to all this, and I'm sorry that this has taken so long, but I think it's important to get the whole perspective of this. I don't want to leave anything out here. It's the vast majority of deep storage vault compartments have been reopened for dubious reasons, for exact data on re-audits. And then after years of prosecuting, there are facts that as it lay in front. The majority of the deep storage vaults compared have been reopened unknown. Now the thing is that would they be considered deep storage? That's my only question. How do you really define that deep storage? I know they talked about it, but is there a chance of this maybe being miscommunicated? My guess is probably not. But I'm going to go with the benefit, give Jan the benefit of the doubt here, and say that it is indeed deep storage vaults. But there may be some other areas or other vaults that have these seals on them. And also, can you potentially reflag these vaults? Recategorize them. Okay, this vault, there's 42 of them here. Yes, they're at Fort Knox, but this particular vault, we're gonna remove its deep storage vault status for one reason or another, and it does need to be moved for one reason or another. And that's still, the jury's still out as to why that would be the case. But Jan is saying that there's some falsehoods here. But I'm not even necessarily sure that I would go so far as to say that there is any falsehoods. Maybe there's just a bureaucratic snafu or miscommunication, is my guess. My investigation concerns the audits which appear to have been executed with an inadequate degree of integrity. And I can agree with that. Accordingly, there should be a new audit authorized by Congress, which incidentally is also the opinion of former U.S. Mint Director Evan C. Moy. Exactly right. There we go. So here he says, there should be a comprehensive audit authorized by Congress. And so, yes, indeed. So that's kind of where that is. So we'll see how this plays out. But it is interesting and fascinating indeed to see where this is going at the most secure facility for the precious metal. But it is no mistake that there should be an audit and for this facility, I believe, for sure. And look at that, right up close to this base here, Fort Knox. And my guess is why they wouldn't do a massive public audit is because it made, well, you know, they could do it and it probably wouldn't make much news because the mainstream media is not interested in this type of thing. Those of us who actually care about the country, we are. And we would like to see this audit take place. And I believe it should be transparent and it should be thorough. And I think the reason why people have been questioning is because it's not been handled in the most effective way. And I think part of it lies in the article, you know, where their different agencies have gotten involved over the years, and in the categorization of these things, and to show the full confidence. And I just think there should be a whole thing done. It will be expensive to do, but I think it's worth it because we need the confidence, and we need to let the world know, especially when other nations around the world continue to acquire gold at a record pace. And to have the assurance that we have all over 8,000 metric tons of this precious metal. Thanks again for sticking it with me through this, and thanks again to Chuck and Plata for sharing this with me. I wanted to take a deep dive into this, and want to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for watching, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.